Hello world, it's Anonymous here, live and in stereo. And I want to tell you what it was like to grow up in People of Praise. People of Praise just gained national attention because of Amy Coney Barrett, who is gunning for Ruth Bader Ginsburg's spot on the Supreme Court. Not only would Amy Coney Barrett seek to overturn the Affordable Care Act, she would also try to reverse Roe v. Wade. She is a danger to society. But back to People of Praise. POP for short. Members are called poppers. I was never a member of POP, but my parents were. They still are. POP is a non-denominational Christian evangelical group of people. When I was 8, I made a vow with my 4 siblings to never join POP. I'm the only one who made it out. POP was a big part of my life from the beginning of my childhood. I have no idea how my parents got involved with the cult. I just know that they were. My parents were also Catholic. On Sunday mornings, we went to Catholic Mass for an hour, and then in the evening, we went to a POP meeting for 2 hours. So for 3 hours every Sunday throughout my entire childhood, I had unwillingly devoted my time to boring religious gatherings. I also went to small group meetings for youth throughout the week, which made me cry. I remember sitting on the floor during POP meetings and coloring, trying to tune out the awful singing and stomping, hand clapping, and the raising of hands in prayer. I was so bored I'd look for ABC gum to chew, until one day it got stuck in my hair and my mother had to cut it out. I am the oldest of 5 children. I got treated the worst. As I was their firstborn, they were still excited to raise our child to join POP. I was not allowed to watch TV or eat any junk. That's not too bad. But POP teaches their members that public schools are evil. In fact, anything not affiliated with POP was evil. So my mother tried to homeschool me. She failed epically. I started to become withdrawn and angry. My parents spanked me hard if I disagreed or complained. I wasn't allowed to say what I liked or disliked. I blacked out a lot of my childhood, but I do remember some things. One day I wanted to play outside and my parents wouldn't let me. It was the middle of winter. So I left the house with no winter gear on. They locked me out and would not let me back in no matter how much I begged and pleaded. So I walked away and went to a neighbor's house. In that moment, I began to associate home as unsafe. A place to be trapped. A prison. To this day, I still have to tell myself home is safe now. But I also learned I had the power to walk away and find my own solution. When I entered 2nd grade, I couldn't read or write. So in desperation, my parents decided to put me in a private school. They wanted to send me to the school where all the POP kids went, but I was too far behind. So I went to a Lutheran private school. I loved it there. It was small. There were only 5 children in the class. I didn't know at the time, but I had PTSD and the small class size helped. I worked hard and did twice the work each day to get caught up. I did so well they let me skip a grade. It was at this time I realized I was gay. I told my mom, who immediately shot it down. This was forbidden and one of the worst things to happen to her child. Eventually, they beat it out of me, or so we all thought. When I was in 6th grade, I was told I would go to POP school Trinity for 7th to 12th grade. I begged and pleaded not to go. I wanted to go to the public school with my best friend. Anywhere but that hellhole. But I had no choice. I was forced to go. It was torture. I became very depressed and rarely spoke at school. Every day I begged my parents to let me go to another school. Every single day for 5 years until 12th grade when I gave up. I was always in trouble. I could do nothing right. I was always in detention at school and grounded at home, and for small things like swearing or eating in class. One time at home I emptied the dryer like my mother asked, and when she went to check it was full again. I was so furious I said she must be a witch. My dad was so angry with me I got grounded for several weeks. Another time my beloved hamster died. I was distraught and wanted another one. But my parents said no. I had a meltdown and got grounded for 3 months over the summer. My entire summer vacation gone over a hamster. I remember sneaking out to get the mail so I could say hi to my best friend at the mailbox. Remember, we didn't have cell phones then, and I wasn't allowed to watch TV very much. So I did nothing. Eventually I found a way to entertain myself. I listened to CDs in my room and burned myself with bobby pins. I hated my life and wanted to die. I threatened to call child services on them, and they locked me in the basement overnight away from the phone. There was a phone down there that they took off the wall. I'd sleep in front of the space heater on the floor. I did not feel loved. My parents hated me. I was their gay child, even though I had blocked that part out. They remembered. I just didn't date. I didn't care. I wasn't even allowed to, even if I had wanted to. When I made my dad angry, he would pin me on the floor and hit me, or chase me down the hallway to my room, smacking my head. Every time I was alone with one of my parents' friends, I'd beg them to talk to them about getting me out of Trinity. They'd try, and then never bring it up again. I even went to the dean of the school, but they all went silent. Eventually, I got a job when I was 15, serving tables. I loved it. It saved my life. It gave me an escape. I was also very good at it. I was able to buy clothes I wasn't allowed to wear, like Abercrombie and Fitch. POP women all look the same. Long hair, fluffy, ugly, shapeless clothes. Later I learned they called adult women handmaids. I got in trouble when they saw that Abercrombie shirt. I just went and bought another one. Eventually I bought a car, and that's when life got a little better. I'd be gone for days and they couldn't stop me. I even started smoking and going to concerts. I was having fun. Trinity had a lot of weird rules, like we couldn't have our lockers next to the boys. All the boys and girls were always separated. We were not allowed to have class with boys. It was only girls. Girl who graduated and got valedictorian, it was taken away because she was caught smoking weed when she was long gone from the high school. We were only allowed to wear certain shoes and certain uniforms. Uniforms aren't so bad, but these were strictly regulated, and they made us look like big floating blobs of humans. We all looked exactly the same. I remember having to get special permission to wear tennis shoes because I had hurt my foot. We were not allowed to date. We were barely even allowed to talk to anyone who was not of the same gender as us, which is funny because I technically was not straight. They had this fear that children would get pregnant or something like that, when in reality, they really should have trusted us. The funny thing is, I remember our priest one day telling my dad that his children were going to have sex whether he wanted us to or not, and we couldn't stop it. He might as well just make sure that we were doing it safely. And my dad said, no, not under my house. They are not going to do that. I'm not going to allow it, and I can control it. The priest rolled his eyes and walked away. I cut off my long hair as I had started getting unwanted attention from older men in POP. It had been down to my waist. I tried to hide my beauty. I overheard members calling me a fox. I didn't really know what that meant, but my mom explained it. Finally, when I entered 12th grade, my dad told me I could transfer to a new school. I said no because I was almost done. He said he would have let me leave if my grades had dropped. I was furious that the answer lay in just giving up, and it would have been so easy. 12th grade was the hardest year. I got confirmed as a Catholic, so they stopped asking me to join POP. But my CPTSD crept up on me. I would have horrible panic attacks and lay on the floor for hours trapped. I stopped eating. I felt guilty about everything. My parents had given up on parenting their 5 children. They were tired, and it was just too hard. I did a lot for my siblings. My parents even stopped grocery shopping, so I would do it when I could. There was not enough food in the house. I was always hungry. I had to drop out of sports and quit my job. My mother had attempted to homeschool the youngest, who was dropping behind just like I had. I eventually needed something to do, so I signed up for a mission trip with a group of young people from POP to go visit Louisiana and build a home. There I experienced firsthand what it was like in one of their homes, their group homes full of people who had a head, and they pooled all their money together. They went grocery shopping together. They had built that home together. They were one unit, and it was very strange. It scared me. As we were building the home, one girl took a liking to me and started talking to me a lot. I thought it was strange she wanted to be my friend, but I let her talk to me. It became clear why she wanted to buddy up to me. She wanted me to join POP. I had turned 18, and I was ready to be groomed to be one of their handmaids. I was furious that that was why she was talking to me, and I stopped speaking to her. And when I went back home, I never went to another POP meeting. I told my parents I was done, and I would never, ever, ever go near that place again. POP has men and women who vow to stay single for God, kind of like priests except not. One of these men was always at my house. He would flirt with me and my mother constantly. He also made eyes at my youngest sister, who was 10 years younger than me. He drove me crazy. I hated him and he creeped me out. I begged my mother to kick him out of the house. She liked him, so she said no. She'd slap me if I pushed it. She forced him to help me move away to college. I figured they were having an affair. I filmed the whole ride there because I wanted him gone. But of course my parents couldn't get divorced because they were Catholic and members of People of Praise, so they weren't allowed to leave each other. Things got so bad between my parents that my dad left for a year. He moved to another state for a year, saying that it was because of his job. And I knew something was wrong. I stayed up late with my mother every single night, trying to get the truth out of her, and she never told me. Only now do I realize that they had broken up and they were not together. They really should have been honest with us, but they couldn't chance anyone finding out in People of Praise, because if they had found out, they would have been in huge trouble. And when you are in trouble in People of Praise, you lose your life and you lose your lifeline. People who left People of Praise were ostracized. They ruined their names. They went after them. And you basically weren't allowed to leave. And if you did, they made your life a living hell. And that is the biggest difference between them and other religious organizations, is that they control every aspect of your life. When it came time for me to go to college, I had been cooking in the kitchen one day, and I accidentally sliced open my hand, and I had to get 5 stitches. The stitches weren't so bad, and my thumb healed very quickly. But being that I was not allowed to go to any doctors that were not members of People of Praise, my parents did not bring me back to the clinic to get the stitches removed. I waited and I waited and I waited. My thumb itched and burned as the stitches sat in my thumb, and I cried because it hurt so bad. They referred me over to a doctor who was in People of Praise and said that I could go to him to get them removed. He didn't call me, and I waited and I waited. Finally, I got the guts to call him. I didn't like him. He scared me. But I went over there and I asked him to remove them, and he did. It didn't even hurt. I figured I probably could have done it myself. I don't know why I had to have him do it. I didn't say a word when I was over there because I knew that if I said something wrong, he would go tattle on me, and I would get in huge trouble. While I was at college, I started to make friends who were not in POP. I stopped going to church. There were a couple other girls at the college with me who also went to Trinity. They called their parents and said they were worried about me, who then went to my parents. Tattletales. This coming from a girl who hid in her dorm and cut herself with razors. They were so worried about me when they should have been worried about their own daughter. What if she cut the wrong vein? What if she went too deep? I had just stopped going to church, but they were more worried about me. The RA had to confiscate her razors. My parents ripped me out of the school and dragged me back home. They locked me in my room away from the world, but I got out. I had a telephone. My friend from college called the police. The police knocked on my door while I was locked in my room, and I could hear them talking. My mother said, "Oh no, there's nothing wrong here, officer. Don't worry about it." And they left without questioning it. I was too scared to call the police myself because I didn't know where I would go. Meanwhile, I slept and I got caught up on my rest, and I was trying to help my siblings. I didn't want to just walk away, but my mother started acting even more crazy when I went back. I tried taking over my sister's care and feeding her and teaching her, but my mother was upset. So I called my grandparents, her parents, and I told them what was going on, and they hung up on me. They refused to help me. I don't know if they just didn't believe me or if they were scared. In a fit of rage, my mother told my sister, who was 9 or 10 at the time, that she was going to be punished. And she locked her in her room with no food and no homework. Who punishes a child with no food and no homework? That doesn't make sense. Take away their candy or take away the TV. But my siblings had nothing, so that was all they could take away. I was furious, and I knew that eventually they would do something horrible with me. As we began to fight more and more, and I tried leaving the house to get away, they knew they were losing me, and they knew that I was no longer going to be Catholic, and they knew that I also was never going to join People of Praise. That ship had sailed. They were never going to convince me otherwise, and that was not acceptable in their minds. I didn't have a choice. They had even picked out someone for me to marry who had gone to high school with me. I didn't know this boy. I had rarely ever talked to him. We weren't allowed to talk to boys. If a boy ever called the house, my dad would pick up the phone and hang up on him. My parents were so supposedly worried about me that they called that doctor who had removed my stitches and brought him over to do a psych evaluation on me. Well, he was not a psychologist, so I didn't know why he was there. I also didn't trust him. I didn't like him. I didn't want anything to do with People of Praise. I had hated that organization since I was a child because I knew it was wrong. I told him I was fine and that I was not depressed and that I was okay. And he offered to pray with me. This is another thing they did. They loved to do the laying on of hands, they called, and speak in tongues and perform miracles. They had healed cancer, and my sister had thought that they had healed her leg because one of her legs was longer than the other, and now after going to the chiropractor and getting prayed over, they were miraculously the same length. These people were insane, and I knew it, and nothing they could say to me convinced me to trust them. I just had enough smarts around me and enough ways out that I never fell for it. Finally, one day, I overheard my mother speaking to her boyfriend, mistress, whatever you want to call him, eternally single dude in People of Praise that was always at my home, and she was talking about bringing me somewhere. I don't know, maybe conversion therapy or something. So I grabbed a backpack full of clothes, and I called my friend from college, and I walked out the front door. So I met them at a gas station, and I left. I had started dating someone at that time, so I went and I moved in with him. I only went back one time to get all my stuff. Well, that was pretty easy, because before I had left, they had put all of it in boxes in the garage. So I didn't have to go far. That was another reason why I knew that they were planning on doing something horrible with me. I escaped, and I made sure that I brought some big guys with me so that they couldn't try anything. I showed up unannounced so they couldn't plan anything. I felt terrible I had left my siblings behind. I tried to call child services, but it did nothing. They said as long as there was food in the home, they didn't care, because there are no laws against cults in America. Nobody cares if you try to indoctrinate your children. Nobody cares if you try to send them to a school that is basically a prison to brainwash them. Nobody cares if their children are miserable as long as they are fed. So I had to leave. I had to leave basically my child, who was actually my sibling that I had raised. I had changed most of her diapers and fed her and taught her and loved her, but I had to leave her behind. And I was very, very sad about it. And there was no way for me to maintain contact. It would not have been safe for either one of us. After a few years, I tried to keep contact with my other siblings, but they fell victim to the clutches of People of Praise. One of my sisters almost escaped, and I had been trying to help her see the way. But she kept getting sucked back in. I told her she needed to cut off contact with them because any sort of contact with them was dangerous. Their brains were not their own. They were psychotic. She didn't believe me. And finally, I knew that they had sucked her back in. She kept trying to get me to go to meetings with people who were members. They would lie and say they had left, but I knew that they hadn't because I could find it online saying that they were still members. It just got to be too dangerous, so I don't talk to any of them. I live my life away from them. I've built my own little family, but it does hurt not to have a family. But you can't have a family that is trying to brainwash you and destroy you and take away all of your choice. The person that she had been trying to set me up with a meeting with had been someone that I had babysat. In high school, I babysat her children. And she had a very, very sad story. She was not Catholic, as most members of People of Praise are Catholic. But not all Catholics are members of People of Praise. They are two different things that have nothing to do with each other, despite what the media is telling you. This woman, she was a Universalist Unitarian, and she was married to a man for a long time while I was a child. They adopted 2 children from China, and I would babysit those children. But sadly, her husband met someone online in Texas and left her and moved away and left her with these 2 rambunctious, wild, adopted children who she could not control or help at all. People of Praise did not assist her either. They had no mercy on her. Eventually, her house became extremely dirty, and her children were out of control. I could control them when I babysat them, but I was the oldest of 5. I knew how. So, People of Praise walked into her house, and they took away her children. They confiscated them, and they gave her 1 month to clean up her place. And they said once her place was clean, she would get her children back. This is illegal. They had no right to do that. They are not child services. Oh, but they did it. There was nothing I could do. I was not allowed to do anything. I didn't know what I could have done anyways. I was too young at the time. Eventually, she did get her children back, but I don't understand why they didn't offer her more help. Most churches would have offered help. Most churches would not have gotten that meddlesome in their personal lives. To this day, they still try to send people to get me back, but I blocked them. I've changed my name. I've changed my look. I am in hiding, and I want you to understand that Amy Coney Barrett is a threat to society and national security. People of Praise is full of abusers. They promote abusing their children. No one who grew up in this evil cult has ever come forward, and there is a reason why, because we are scared, and also very few of us make it out. I did, and I don't know why. I don't understand why I knew the truth, why I never believed them, but I did. Amy Coney Barrett helped perpetuate my torture. She helps make Trinity into a prison. She was on their board of directors, and she made my life miserable. My beef with her is extremely personal, and I hold her accountable for all of my suffering. No, she is not the only one, but she contributed to it, and she does not belong on the Supreme Court. If you put her there, she will not fight for female rights. And when you sit there and you say that she is a champion for women, you are lying. You do not understand what she has done and what she will do. If you give People of Praise any sort of power, our lives will be ruined. And I am not going back to that spot, and I don't want you to experience what I went through. She is a terrible, wicked, evil person who belongs behind bars for her crimes. There's so much I don't remember, and I believe if I could hack into my memories, I would remember things that would put these people behind bars. But I'm sorry, my brain cannot understand. One of the reasons why I couldn't keep talking to my siblings is because they started telling me memories that I had blocked out, and I cannot go back through and experience them. It is too hard. A nomination for Amy Coney Barrett, a vote for Amy Coney Barrett, is for all of People of Praise. You are not allowed to separate yourself from them. It is forbidden. You must talk to your heads. My parents, every time they had an issue with me or my siblings, or had to deal with a disciplinary action, or make an important decision, they had to go through their head. They were not allowed to raise their children the way that they wanted. And People of Praise knew that my parents were being abusive, and they didn't care. They knew that I was gay, and they beat it out of me. They hated me. Do you really want this type of person to have any sort of power? She says she can separate it. She's not allowed to. When you're a Catholic, you're allowed to have your own separate life. When you're in People of Praise, you are not. It goes against their teachings. They are cruel. And the last thing they need is any sort of power. Women especially are not allowed to have any sort of say. There are no women in their upper ranks. I don't know what everything is called because I was never actually a member. There are a lot of members of People of Praise who have come forward who were former members, and you can go talk to them, but they have been very silent here too. This is a very dangerous thing, and I need you all to understand that People of Praise needs to be eradicated from this earth. They have schools and locations, they call them branches, all over the country. In Oregon, in Minnesota, in South Bend, Indiana, and in Louisiana, and a few others that I don't know of. There's a lot that I don't know of. You have to sign a contract to be a member there, much like other secret organizations. There's nothing wrong with fraternal organizations or things like that. In fact, they've done a lot of good, but People of Praise has done a lot of bad. Do not let them lie. I wish I could tell you who I am, but they are extremely dangerous. And I fear for my life, and I have to protect myself. But I beg and I plead with you, do not vote for her. Do not fall victim to her lies. This is the truth about People of Praise, and I am anonymous.